time and I heard that I was ugly. Came from a chick who knew when I touch, I said my face bomb, abs tight, rack stuck up, shack height, jury.
And you heard it right there, Cardi B with the intro. This is the AOS podcast, and this episode 16. We're excited to be back. I'm 1/3 of the AOS, David McGuire. Excited for you to join us. Before I jump in, got to take care of some business. So if you are on Facebook, make sure you like our Facebook page at the AOS podcast. My Twitter folks, if you're already following us, we appreciate you. We need you to go ahead and tag 3 other people so they can follow us as well. If you're new and you don't follow us, you can catch us at the Recess Podcast. Also subscribe to our YouTube page under the same name, the Recess Podcast. And we're excited for this episode. We have a great guest with us. The energy is already feeling good. We had a great pre-show conversation. We're going to bring that same energy with us this evening. So before we get started, let's talk a minute. You see the name, Mr. No Better Than Any Educator. So I got a couple things I'm going to get off my chest real quick. So many of you seen on social media the image that's gone around that says black male teachers can do more than gym and discipline. I'm going to take a slight issue with that. And here's why. So I feel like I'm no better than any other educator. And so when I see that, what it says to me is it's a slap in the face to those black males who are in those roles, whether it's PE, whether it's discipline. I associate discipline with being a dean. And anybody that's been in a school setting, you know, one of the hardest jobs is being a dean or handling discipline in the school, because if you don't have discipline, you're not going to have any type of structure or instruction going on. And so it just bothers me when I see that. I feel like it's a slap in the face. I feel like we're undermining the work that those people do. And if you do PE right, or gym as they call it, right? If you look at obesity rates and other things that's happening with children, they need more physical activity. They need more health and things like that. So these are valuable people in the school setting. So when you say that black male teachers can do more, we obviously know they can do more, but that's a slap in the face of those that do that, especially when you think about discipline being some folks' avenue into the education space. And so while I understand the premise behind it, to me, it's good for clickbait, which takes me to my next thing. I'm sick of all you celebrities on social media doing stuff for clout. How about you focus on making your kids and your school celebrities instead of yourself? So when we got teachers in freezing cold weathers in Chicago sitting out in the snow to prove a point, you look real goofy. I'm going to just say that. You look real goofy sitting out in the snow with a blanket in freezing weather. You're not proving any point, otherwise trying to get a bunch of likes. And that's not what this is about. There are real folks out here struggling. There's real people out here dying. And I think you're making a mockery of this whole thing. So you and your education fame on social media can go on somewhere, because I'm also sure that you can't even unpack a standard or teach a kid how to read. But I'm off my soapbox. I'm glad to be in this affinity space that is the AOS podcast, which is the title of the show. Welcome to our bi-weekly free PD. And I'm going to pass it off to my brother Doc, who's in Missouri freezing his butt off. How's it going down there, brother?
Man, I just want to be like, and that was episode 16 of the AOS podcast. But hey, man, like I said, it's freezing, dog. Like I said, air temperature has been like -10 degrees, 30, 40 below zero, with the wind chill. Like it's crazy cold out here. We've been out of school pretty much all week. You see I'm bundled up at the crib. I don't even know how to follow up the little intro you gave. But the one thing I do want to say, man, it's really on my mind heavily, though, because we are literally like a month away from when we went into this whole, quarantine, pandemic, learning, things like that. So I've been really just thinking about the whole last 12 months and what has transpired in the world of education. And have we got it right, or what mistakes we've made? What can we do differently moving forward? Because even as we move forward, I don't think this whole virtual learning thing is not going to go away. There's still going to be people who want to keep their kids at home. I think even going into next year, we might have anywhere from 10 to 25% of our population online learning. So really just trying to, figure out this virtual learning thing, as long as we've been doing it, but how can we do it even better? So I'm excited, though, to be here for this Affinity Space. We got Doc on the ones and twos with us. Excited to have another Doc on here, and I'm waiting for these other two brothers to get them letters too. So I'm gonna throw it the ball, man. What's good, bro? And you can introduce our guests.
Fellas, it's a beautiful day today. Y'all are sitting up in the cold, but out here in Cali, it's about 60 degrees. I'm not gonna throw it in your face like that, but
Please don't.
but it's good out here. I'm feeling good today. I'm excited. You all have brought it on that intro. I mean, David, I don't know how to follow that up, man. You brought the heat on that, edge of celebrity and how you talk about, the the downplaying of the importance of that dean role as well as the PE teacher. But, you know, and Doc, you kind of hit on where I'm at today, almost a year in to this remote learning for us. It's been wild. And right now, today was our first day with sixth graders on campus. And so like we're doing all sorts of things to make learning on campus happen again. And, you know, it's been a big push in our community and those types of things. And as staff overall, we want to get back to school. And we've been making a lot of adjustments. I mean, after this whole thing, you can't tell me there aren't things that we can't do as educators. I mean, we've got like 4 different systems going on right now just in my school. And I'm sure that that's how it is in every single district just about across the country. And so, you know, I'm fired up. We got more kids on campus and we're making it happen. And I'm excited to be in this space with y'all again today. I want to take just a minute to introduce our guest.
Well, real quick before you introduce our guest, I just want to say, because you try to throw that warm weather in our face, but when y'all was going through fire season, bro, we was really looking out for you and worried about you. I just want to put that out there. Go ahead and introduce our guest.
We did. Good call, Doc.
True. And I appreciate that because, you know, that's real. And I've lived in the weather growing up in Ohio and being on the East Coast as well. Like that cold is no joke. You can't play around with that. So I apologize, kind of. But anyway, not to throw any more shade, but I'm so excited that we have Dr. Maisha Beasley on the day. You know, I'm not going to go in and mess up her bio, but I will tell you this. I have had the opportunity to work with her personally around our topic of creating affinity spaces. And she worked with us when I was an assistant principal at one of our high schools. And she does some amazing work with creating spaces where Black students, Black educators feel that they can be themselves. Because where I'm at, you know, I'm one of few, and I talk about it every episode, but it's really important that we have a place to share our experiences. And Dr. Beasley, I'm not going to embarrass you, but I will say every time she came into school, I made a deal to let everybody in the office know that this was Dr. Beasley in the house. That was intentional because, you know, we had no Black women at school, and for them was and how she rolls was very important. So Dr. Beasley, I want to welcome you to the AOS podcast. We are excited to have you. And, you know, if you could go in and tell us a little bit about your background and what you do, that's going to get us kicked off for an amazing conversation.
Great. That was so sweet of you. Soon to be Dr. Ball. It's going to happen.
Right.
It's on its way.
Put that in the atmosphere.
I'm putting it in the atmosphere for you, sir. So a bit about me. I am from the Bay Area. I'm a native of the Bay Area. I grew up, I say in the Bay Area total, Oakland, San Francisco, and Livermore, which is a suburban neighborhood about 30 minutes east of Oakland. And I had a really rich childhood and a rich growing up. I'm a product of a huge family. My mom is one of 12 siblings, and I have 43 first cousins. And so every day was about family and love and education. And I also like to talk about the fact that I grew up in all the spaces, right? So I have a very dynamic upbringing, being in the 80s and 90s, that yes, we lived in the suburbs, but I also was in Oakland on the weekends. And I was also in San Francisco with my grandparents in the holidays and weekends. And so I had this very didactic upbringing that was both suburban and urban. And I think a lot of times in today's age, we don't talk about the fact that there's two, right? There's two upbringings. There's what happens for folks who live in suburbia, and then there's what happens when you're around your family that might not be in suburbia with you. And so that was really my upbringing. I went to San Diego State for my undergraduate degree in communications, go Aztecs, and then thought, I'm good. Got my degree. I've done what I said I was going to do. First generation college student. And then I became a resident director. And as a resident director, I was realizing that I didn't know if I could get fired for saying the things that I was saying to the students I was saying them to. So I was like, well, what do you do to not get fired? And they were like, maybe you should go get a master's. And so I went and got a master's at University of the Pacific, which is also a small liberal arts college in California, and worked for about 5-10 years in orientation, student affairs, and even in that space was creating affinity spaces for students, which I didn't know that's what it was called. I was just saying, hey, I see that there's not anybody taking care of Black students here. I'm noticing that there's not representation here. And so one student tells the story of how I came into a cafeteria at University of Pacific and found all the Black students. And we're like, what do you do? Where are you at? Where do you live? And she was like, I felt seen. And then I felt attacked. And then I felt like I had to, become part of whatever it is that you were putting on, which was orientation. I worked in orientation, like I said, 10 years. And then I decided to kind of take a turn into K through 12 spaces and return back to my roots to Livermore. It wasn't intentional at all, but I don't believe anything happens by chance. I was at my mom's retirement party. I was at my mom's retirement party, and she was sharing my dissertation with folks. And they said, well, can you come be a mentor? I said, absolutely. I'll do a 1-session type of deal and be done with it. And next thing I know, I have a full-fledged program for African-American students called the African-American Scholars Project. And it went from one school district, one school, to one school district, 2 schools, to 4 school district, 8 schools in a matter of 6 months. There's a lot of implicit bias, microaggressions, overt oppression in that experience. But what was most important for me in that experience is that students were seen and that they had a safe space to be. And that came again from my upbringing in my professional upbringing in higher ed. My dissertation was on the adjustment of African-American women to predominantly white institutions. And so I started a class with my girlfriends, John Lee Tunstall and Samara Blackman and Maisha Smith. We started a class called Sister to Sister at UCLA in 2014. It was the first of its kind, and it was an answer to what we were doing for Black males in the space. So a lot of women were saying, well, you guys are doing that for Black males. Are you going to do it for Black females? And we're like, ooh, we're busy. And then Dr. Tyrone Howard, who ran the Black male class, was like, well, if you all get together, you can, maybe put it together. And we realized that what was done for Black men wasn't the same as what was needed for Black women. And so that the creation of that class, and now we're in our 15th cohort. We have about 300 girls who've gone through the class, and 1/4 of them, I think 1/4 go on to a graduate degree, and 95% of them are graduating in a 4-year rate. We see the benefit of being seen. We see the benefit of holding an affinity space for Black women, especially in higher education. So right now, I'm teaching that class, and I'm leading my own consulting firm where I'm creating affinity spaces for Black students and holding white allies and white teachers and educators accountable for the work that they do with students of color. So that's a little bit about me.
That's a lot of it, Doc. You kind of took all the storm and put it in there. There's a lot to unpack there. Dave, you got something? I'll let you go.
Yeah, I had a question, and on the piece, well, I have 2, but I'm gonna ask this first one. So when you talk about the affinity space as a whole, our white allies accountable, how have you seen that change since the actions of last summer, and even we can go back before last summer, just with the murder of Black people at the hands of police officers, and then you see our white allies who get these book clubs and do all this other stuff. How are you working to hold them accountable outside of the book club that they do when they read how to be an anti-racist? What does that look like to do more than just have them in book clubs and having the conversations within these affinity spaces?
We're going deep. We just starting right on in. I'm good with it. I was like, let's edge of the water. Okay, cool. Let me get my bomb on. Just bomb right on in. The way I'm actually holding them accountable every day, to be quite frank with you. I'll take it back. So I started my work with suburban neighborhoods in 2017. And in 2017, again, it wasn't, I didn't come into the space going, I'm about to start a program for African-American students. It happened. And what I was realizing is that as I was working with African-American students, I was hearing things, me and my staff were hearing things when we would meet with them every other week, like, well, nobody called me the N-word this week, so I'm okay. Or my teacher asked me how my parents talked to me about slavery, but I'm from Nigeria and I don't even know anything about slavery. And we were hearing these comments over and over and over again. I mean, those are just like really surface, they get deeper. And what I was realizing is like, well, if we continue to do this work, it won't be enough for us to just do it with students. At some point, I had to stop doing the work that I was doing with the school districts for a variety of reasons. Again, implicit bias, microaggressions, overt oppression of the spaces. But when I came back because of the killings, right? The executions of Black bodies was really the push for me to come back. I was working in a job that I really didn't like, and I was asking, like, what am I going to do next? And literally in July, I get a call from a colleague in one of the suburban communities. And she's like, it's time for you to come back. I know that you, like, I know we made it hard for you, but this time, here's what you should do. And one of the things that she told me is like, come back and do the African-American Scholars Program, but request that you also do professional development and say that the two have to be lockstep. And so I took her advice. And when I came back, I said, sure, I'll come back and do the African-American Scholars Project, but only if I can do professional development for the whole school district. Only if I can also work with students who are not from marginalized communities once COVID is over, right? It was like, it's not just this anymore. It has to be this plus this. And so because I had created trust with the school district, because they knew me, because I'm from these suburban communities, it was like, okay, we'll do that. And so one of the ways that I'm holding folks accountable every day is like, we can't talk about how to be anti-racist if you don't understand what implicit bias is. We can't talk about how to be an anti-racist if you don't understand what a microaggression is. If you don't understand that asking a Black girl about her hair is a microaggression and you want to talk about being an anti-racist, it's not going to work, right? Like, these two things can't exist together. So let's start at the ground level, and sure, have your book club, do your thing, have those conversations. But I also push this narrative while they're having those conversations that, like, well, if you're trying to get, are you trying to get through the book? Or are you trying to understand the book? Are you trying to like make necessary change? Or are you just trying to check this off your list? And so I'm constantly asking those questions, but I'm doing it in compassion and in love, because I realize a lot of it is unintentional.
So I have one more question. And so I graduated from a HBCU, Central State University, class of 2010, Delta
North
Z,
Carolina?
Spring 06. Huh?
North Carolina?
No, in Central State in Ohio.
Central State, Ohio.
Yeah. So when I think of HBCUs, and I've heard this, people say that HBCUs is one big affinity space, right? While I think that is true, do you feel that there's other things that HBCUs can do with the Black students that are already on campus to go deeper into those affinity spaces, and not just saying, okay, because you're here, you're in a safe space? Because I've seen and heard of stories where not all HBCUs are actually safe spaces. So how can we in predominantly Black spaces still make sure that we protect that affinity space and make it sacred?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with folks who I used to teach a master's level class, and I think 3 or 4 of my students were students at a HBCU. And one of the things that I always used to ask is like, how do you know where other people are from? Like, how do you represent the diaspora at a HBCU? Do you ask questions like, are you from a suburban environment? Or do you ask questions like, you know, what is your socioeconomic status? Because I think there's a lot of assumptions made that being Black means you understand what Blackness is. And I think because our diaspora is so wide and so varied, and we have folks that are first generation coming from the continent itself. We have folks that are coming from the diaspora Haiti that are look Black, but have a different like ethnic experience than Black Americans. And if there's not the space for those groups to live out their truth at a HBCU, you can feel marginalized or othered and leave. I have plenty of friends that started off at a HBCU and they're like, no, thank you. It's too many Black people, right? And I have plenty of folks who go to HBCUs. You know, I have students that are high school students that matriculate into HBCUs because they're looking for a Black experience that isn't exactly what they pictured in their mind, isn't what they get, but they stick it out and then are like, oh, okay, now I get it, right? So there has to be, it's a tug and a pull, right? I think HBCUs have to change with the times. And I think students have to go in with a clear understanding that it's not going to be a different world. It's not going to look like Grownish, right? It's not like, you know, Dwayne and Whitley. Like, you're not going to get that.
School days. Yep. School, right? That's
right. Like, it's not going to harken back to days of old. It's going to be the experience you make it.
Absolutely.
So, so you know, we really try to provide, like I said, like PD. So bringing us Affinity Space on here, talking about it is one thing, but now I want you to be able to coach some people through a situation. So I'm going to set the scenario for you, and this is a real scenario, so it's not made up. So pretty much, you know, the Super Bowl just happened. Shout out to the GOAT, Tom Brady, for getting number 7. But here in Kansas City, you know, the Chiefs were playing the Super Bowl, so it was a big thing here in Kansas City. We did the whole run up to the Super Bowl, Spirit Week, and at a school district in the Kansas City metropolitan area, there was a teacher, a white teacher, who dressed up like Mahomes, and Mahomes sells these Mahomes wigs. So basically it's a bandana with his curly hair, kind of because he wears these bandanas in the game like that. And some students at the school who are African-American students who are the minority in the school, is probably, they make up maybe 20% of the population of that school or whatever, basically found that offensive, you know, that he dressed up like Mahomes in his likeness, wore this wig. And there's some quotes in the news article that came out of the Kansas City Star that said that they likened it to blackface. So if you were to come in and kind of work with the school on, like, how do you help these kids who liken this look as blackface, what would you do to help this staff and these students understand where the kids are coming from? And that, you know, I believe that intention is a lot to do with it as well, but how does that play out in that space?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is intention versus impact, right? Like, I think as educators, we always think about, like, I have the best of intention, but I don't always think about its impact. And so I would let's deal with the educator space first, right? I think in a school district, if you're not thinking about the systems in place to make sure you're holding educators accountable for how they deal with and present themselves to all students, it's a systematic issue, right? You could blame said teacher, you could blame a said principal, but if there's not something, and I just recently found this out, that there's not a lot of school districts that require you to have diversity training. There's not a lot of school districts that require cultural competence for you to be able to keep your job. It blows my mind, right? That, like, as a social worker, you got to have 4,000 hours and redo your licensure every whatever amount of years. But as a teacher, get in there with them kids and good luck, you know? And so I think systematically we have an issue that I always want to address at the root. I don't like to do one-offs, like this teacher should have done this and then that teacher should have done that, because it's a root problem. And I think if we don't address it at its root, we will always be in this circle of, well, I think this and I think that, and you should do this and you should do that, where really the root of the problem is what's happening for teachers around equity, inclusion, cultural competency, curriculum, what's happening for educators who are at the administrator level to hold those folks accountable. Because if I say that was wrong, but the principal's like, it was wrong, but we're going to do what we want to do, then what I said or how I came into the space to help the space out doesn't matter. So let's just say there's buy-in from the school district, right? I think conversations are important. I think courageous conversations are important. I think hitting something head on and having a space with the students to say, tell us how you feel. Tell us what else is going on, because it's always a symptom of a larger problem, right? Like Mahomes didn't just show up in the curly hair and that was the only problem. Like there probably is other things happening in this school district and in that particular school that are making the students be like, and again, here we go, right? So you have to be able to address, like, what are the symptoms of the disease? And what do you need for us to do to make you feel comfortable? You're heard. Somebody who's in the middle, who has an objective opinion, can share that information back and forth and come up with, again, systematic ways to address that problem and to continually address the root of the problem so that we can get to a better standard of living as a cohesive community.
Awesome. I'm going to follow up, Doc. I think it's really a challenge. So speaking about where I am, you know, the community and things like that, you know, getting to that root is an easy thing. So how do you approach? I mean, last episode we had several diversity and equity coordinators on the show, and we had a really good conversation. So I'm curious, if I'm in a district I don't have that, you know, you have the specialty. What can I do? What can I do? You know, as a site principal, or you know, if I'm district leadership or whatever the case is, how do I start to get to that root?
Yeah, first of all, don't think that you can do it overnight. Like, I think, again, this is something I see all the time. Okay, can you come in? I need you to do 2 1-hour sessions. Diversity fixed. What? How? Like, I feel like Kanye, right? How, Sway? Like, how in 2 sessions are we done, right?
Because we checking the box. Because they're checking the box, right?
They're checking the box. And my approach is, what I oftentimes say is like, there's 400 years almost of slavery. Right? Then there was like systematic oppression since slavery. And then you have the Asian American community who were brought in as immigrants to be laborers, but not to be seen as citizens. And that happened from the 1800s. Like, you have hundreds of years of oppression to undo and unravel. It's not going to happen overnight. So that's number one. 2, you need to get somebody who is outside of the district but understands the district. And this is a really important point, because I think a lot of times when we do anti-racist work, one, we think that it only should come from either folks of color or white folks should do it to white folks, right? And I think it's a hybrid model. I think you got to bring your whole team to the table, and it can't just be a black and white thing. You got to bring your folks of different ethnicities, backgrounds, sexual orientations. Everyone has to come to the table to do this work. But it can't be an insider job, but it needs to be a job that people understand. I would never go to Cincinnati and say, I got that. I don't know nothing about Cincinnati. You know, I don't know anything about the demographic. I don't know how y'all get down. I don't know what's suburban versus urban. There needs to be someone who understands the environment and understands the educators and understands the students. That would be the second thing. So 1, it's not going to be done overnight. 2, you need somebody who understands. 3, you have to have a plan where everyone is invested. Because one of the things that is a struggle for me right now in suburban districts that, you know, me and you know about, Demetrius, is that it's like, well, I didn't know about it, or it's too much to do, or can we wait until COVID's over? And it's like, well, when is COVID going to be over? Can somebody give me an end date on COVID? When is the murdering of Black bodies going to be over? Can somebody give me a date on that? When is the victimization of Asian folks going to be over? Can somebody give me a date on that? So if it's never going to be over and it's always going to be something to do, then we all need to be on the same page about doing it systematically and it being imparted in the day-to-day work. We've talked about this several times. It has to be small but intentional. So like if you're talking about like, what can I do now? One of the things that I'm doing with one of the school district is a 21-day challenge. So I have 3 21-day challenges that my staff and I have curated. And it's asynchronous and synchronous. So it's asynchronous in that they can go through the 21-day challenge paced as they wish. The first one was self-care for educators. The second one was pathways to empathy. And the third one is diverse student populations. And they're set apart. So they're not all running at the same time. But the goal is to get folks in the classroom, in this like asynchronous classroom, to really start thinking about what they're thinking about when they're teaching, to start thinking about what they're thinking about when they're making policies and requirements at the district level and at the administrator level, and for them to be able to have intentional conversations with each other about how to change that intentionally over time.
So I got to follow up to your second point where you talked about, you know, they need, as a district or whatever, you need to bring in somebody that knows the environment. And so my question, I guess, is why is it so many times we bring in people who don't know the city, don't know the district, or don't even know the school site? And that could be even at the district level. You know, we have district leaders making decisions at school sites who don't really understand the dynamics of what's going on at their school site. So what would be your words of wisdom to those people who are the ones making the decision of who we're bringing in and where we find those people at? Right.
You know, there's more of us out here doing this work than people really do the research on. I think for those of us on the call who are doctors, you know, you have to do your research. And again, it goes back to this thought of, let me check off this box. So if it looks bright and shiny, it might be the thing that we need, as opposed to like really asking questions of everyone. There's a video that I use in my workshops called 6 Antiracist Strategies. And one of them is ask folks what they need. I know it sounds so simple. It's not a big deal, but people don't often think about it. It's like, okay, how do we get in and fix it? And I think the one, you know, lesson that I would have for white folks who might be listening to this is it's not something you just fix. It's not a car carburetor that went bad or a transmission that needs to be replaced. It is a systematic oppression that is based in white supremacy that has been built over years. And so you have to do the work up front to get the type of people that you need in the system to fix it, to help you fix it, not just let me look at this bright, shiny thing. I know oftentimes people will say to me, well, you don't have a website. Nope, because I'm busy doing the work. You're not on Instagram. Nope, because I'm busy doing the work, right? So like, I'm not the bright, shiny thing. And if you need me to be able to post 15 times on Instagram in order for you to believe that I am steeped in the work and do good work and have great success, go talk to the students who are now at UC Berkeley leading this, right? Like, go talk to them. They'll tell you the impact that I've made. Go talk to the 300 young women, right, who have graduated from UCLA in 4 years or 4.5 years or 5 years because they had a place to be seen. That'll tell you the work that I've done. So I think it also is about like, what are you really looking for versus what are you looking to say you did?
So can you hit us off with just a little like movie trailer of the 6 anti-racist strategies? Just a little movie trailer.
The free version. Give us the free version.
Because just the free version. I just want go ahead and like whet the people appetite so they can call you.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, since you asked, let me give the people a little something. So the first one is start with self. You have to be able to realize like what your deal is. Where are my implicit biases? Where do they lie? Where are my microaggressions? Where am I doing something that may cause harm? So start with yourself. You have to be willing to be self-reflective. And then the second is learn with your crew. So if you're not the person that is like, I got it, I understand it, learn with other people who do get it and who do understand it. Be willing to ask a tough question. Be willing to be uncomfortable. And be willing to be comfortable with being uncomfortable as you learn with other people. Everything is better together. 3, hold each other accountable. This is something I talk about a lot right now. If you hear it, you should stand up and say, I heard that. I know you didn't mean it that way. Again, intention versus impact. I know you didn't mean to ask that Asian student to show the math problem because they're an Asian student, they probably know math. I know you didn't mean it that way, but it probably came across that way. So maybe next time, think about how you might position that differently. Affirm your students. And this is really simple, and it's something that great educators do without thinking. I always bring up one of my teachers from high school, Mrs. Brickwoodell, in 11th grade. I do not think that Mrs. Brickwoodell thought, I'm coming in and I'm going to be an anti-racist in the early 90s. I honestly don't think that that's what she thought. But I do think what she was thinking was, here's a student who's bright and amazing and has potential, but doesn't yet see it because of the fact that she's an honor student and the only honor student. I'm a pause break right here. I was one of 4 Black women to graduate from my high school. So that everyone is clear about like where I came from, right? 4 women. There was no Black men who graduated in my class. So all of the honors classes, only Black person, period. And Mrs. Brickwoodell saw that. And she took the time to affirm me and not just say, you know what? You're Black. I know you have some things going on. I'm going to let you slide. She was like, no, absolutely not. I see you. You will not be just hiding in the shadows with me. You're going to hold yourself accountable and I'm going to hold you accountable. And that meant the world to me. Like, she wrote me throughout my freshman year in college. 5 is think about the larger context. Again, I mentioned the student who came from Africa, who was in a classroom, who the teacher asked, oh, well, we're talking about slavery today. Will you tell us how your family talks to you about slavery? Without thinking about the larger context of the fact that that was the only student of color in that classroom, the fact that he could have been from a different country or had a different ethnic background, even though his race looked Black. So thinking about the larger context of what are you teaching? How are you teaching it? How are you inviting students into the space? And how are you doing no harm? And that's and then the last piece is the way you do no harm is to ask students what they need. Right? And you might not be the person who asks the students what they need. But if you're learning with your crew, say, this is our crew, and I know that Jenny is having some issues with fill in the blank because she's the only in fill in the blank school, I'm going to share that with Demetrius. I'm going to share that with Dr. Smith. Hey, just so you know, Jenny is blah, 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 blah. She shared that with me. I'm sharing it with you so that you can give this student what she needs when she's in your classroom. Because I think so oftentimes we're siloed in our classrooms and we're doing our thing and we forget that we're a community and we should be treating our students as though they're part of this community, which means we share information and we share resources to make them successful, to help them be successful.
So Dr. B, like I'm like taking mad notes, like you killing the game. I just want to give you that there. But there's something that you said about the do no harm, ask what the students need. And something earlier you said about the kids who are, you're doing the work. So you don't need a website. You don't need to be on social media like that because you're doing the work. And if you want to get the proof of the work, go talk to the kids at UC Berkeley who you worked with. So I want to know, like, can you talk specifically about the impacts you've had with students? Because we do all this work to improve student outcomes. So just give us a little bit of like what have you done and what is the impact you've seen on actual students since you've been doing this work?
Okay, I'm gonna try to be an Oakland G right now and not cry. Because every time I talk about students, I get emotional. And I will just share one experience. I took students from one school district to UC Berkeley for a Saturday. We called it Saturday Academies. And so one Saturday a month, we would take students to college. This particular time, we took them to UC Berkeley. I have a lot of friends, a lot of networks. And so I brought my whole network together that was on that campus. I had a friend who was a dean. I had a friend who did admissions. I had students on the campus, and we had a beautiful day. I mean, it was an amazing, amazing day. The students thought that I ordered up a drum line for them, for them. The impact. After that day, I should say this part. So we have lunch because my friend was the dean of students and was over housing. And so he comes in and he's suited and booted. My boys, who were part of the African American Scholars Project, only 2 of them had seen a Black man in a suit. See, starting to get emotional. Only 2 out of 12, I think we had that day. And they were like, "That's you? This is you? Okay." You know, they were hyped. They were like, "We get this for free because you don't have to like take nothing." And he was like, "Nah, this is all me." And he had on his suit, he had on his VIP badge because he was going to the football game, got the boys tickets to the 50-yard line of the football game. So fast forward 1 week. The boys come in for their basketball game. Half of our boys play basketball for this particular school, and they all had on suits with a little handkerchief. Right?
Come on, man. Come on. Come on.
You know, like I'm such a sensitive person. So of course, as soon as they come in, I'm like, don't do it. All of these boys are either in community college or in college right now. All of them. And when you say, and I get chills about it, because when you say representation doesn't matter, I took a picture and I sent it to my homie at UC Berkeley. He's like, "Man, I'm in a meeting. I can't be crying in the meeting." You know, like,
I'm on the show and I'm trying to listen.
You know, I'm like, he's like, "I'm a gangster. I can't be crying in the meeting." And I was like, dude, you can't ever say representation doesn't matter. You can't ever say providing one opportunity, right? This was one opportunity on a Saturday morning to go to just to hang out, you know? And now one of the girls, because it keeps on giving, right? One of the girls who was the most quiet of our girls is now at UC Berkeley, got into Berkeley. That became her dream school on that day. She got into UC Berkeley. She's now a sophomore at Berkeley, and she's now heading the admissions student group, the admissions Black student group that headed her trip, her field trip. So like now she is the person that she was impacted by. So that's the impact. Right. That's just in that space. Like when you talk about the sister to sister impact of that class, you know, it keeps on giving. It keeps on giving. Like my whole staff actually is all Black women. I just hired my first Filipino woman. The whole staff is Black women from the sister to sister class. My assistant was in the other room, sister to sister class. The woman who wrote our 21-day challenge, Harvard graduate with a master's degree, all of her friends took the sister to sister class, and she got the email from her friends like, "Hey, Maisha's looking for somebody to help with her business." The impact keeps on giving. I could talk about that part all day.
That's what you call grow your own right there. That's grow your own right there.
Dr. Beasley, you're not on social media, and so the big thing now is to give people their flowers. But you deserve yours, because I didn't know where that story was going, but that part about those boys showing up to that basketball game in a suit, I led an all boys middle school, right? And I tried to do that myself, and it not that it didn't come off natural, but that story, that's real impact, and that's undefeated because that wasn't pre-planned. He didn't plan to wear a suit to show them that. He did that because it's just what he did, and they saw that impact, and that's real. You can't fake that, and that is powerful. And shout out to you. My eyes got a little watery just hearing that, because I just pictured seeing those boys a week later walking in that game with their suits.
When I tell you, and there was one little boy who didn't have a suit, but he had a makeshift suit. You know,
man, come on.
And he had a makeshift suit, and he didn't have a handkerchief. So he took one of his sister's head rags.
Man, come on, man. Yes.
I said, "You better come on." He was like,
"Come on.
Don't tell nobody."
Because listen, 10, 15 years from now, when he's a doctor or a lawyer or a Fortune 500 CEO or a principal, and he's got a real suit, and they see the before and after, that's going to be powerful. So I want to pivot. I just want to ask a question about the traits. And so I start with self, learn with your crew, hold each other accountable, affirm your students, think about the larger context, and ask students what they need. So there's 2 in there. I wrote some notes on that I want to mention, and then give my thoughts on why I think teachers or people will struggle with that. So the first one is affirm your students. I feel like this will be hard for people because it's hard to give love if you don't love yourself, right? Well, So how do you help somebody? Because I said it to teachers all the time, like, give the kids some love, man. Like, and not the fake love, right? Like, give them some real affirmation. So how do you navigate that with folks that probably really just struggle with loving themselves, which is why they can't give it to anybody else?
Yeah, well, that's why the first 21-day challenge was self-care for educators.
Mm-hmm.
We started with, like, how do you take care of yourself? Do you walk? Do you do yoga? Do you do Krav Maga? Like, what do you do? You know what I'm saying? Like, we started with that as a 21-day challenge because it was an easy way to not blame. And I think a lot of times when or not gotten love yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So we started, and that's why I said my work starts with this intentionality of compassion and love. Because when you can disarm folks with the thing that they maybe haven't gotten or don't know how to give because somebody looks different than them, if you meet them with that, it's really hard. And that's why relationship building is so important. So part of my strategy in the 21-day challenge is, let's start with you. Right. And when we start with folks and we have those conversations with people, and I have them in small groups, I have them in larger context groups. Again, it's asynchronous. People start to realize, like, oh, I made this so much more complicated than it really needed to be. Because if they can be affirmed, then they know how to do it. So I model the thing, right? And I ask my administrators, who I have roundtable discussions with, to model the thing that we hope that they do for their students.
And then my last one is ask students what they need. For me, when I think about school spaces, a lot of educators struggle because they just don't care. Like, they just don't care. So how do you break through that barrier when they just don't care what students, what they need, so they're not even going to ask? Because I agree, it's important to ask students what they need. So how do you break that barrier with folks?
Right. So if it's not the teacher, then maybe it's the janitor. If it's not the janitor, maybe it's the cafeteria lady. If it's not the cafeteria lady, maybe it's administrator, maybe it's a vice principal, maybe it's the yard duty. Somebody can ask a student what they need. Sometimes we have to get outside of the box of thinking it has to be in the classroom. As long as a student feels like they belong, right? We talk about belonging. As long as a student feels like they belong somewhere on a campus, they're going to not just survive, they're going to be able to thrive. That is the whole premise of Sister to Sister. Of course, we know the statistics. African-American women graduate at higher rates from college than African-American males. However, the statistic that's not shared is that we struggle more in careers and finding our career path than African-American males once we graduate, because we're taught to just survive college. We're taught to not really thrive in college. We're taught just to survive college, right? Same thing on a K-12 campus. We're taught, especially when it's dogmatic, and we don't have the pedagogy. Don't get me started talking about bell hooks and my pedagogy around bell, right? Don't get me there. But when it's just a banking model of teaching, and we're not doing this holistic thought, an ideology and framework around teaching, then of course it's going to be hard to ask students what they need. I'm going to give a shout out to my homegirl, Mary Hemphill, who has a book called The 1 Minute Meeting. And she had an F school in North Carolina, and she decided she was going to ask 452 students in her school 3 questions and have a 1 minute meeting. What are your greatest triumphs? What have been your greatest challenges, and what do you need? And she asked all students that. Then she asked all teachers that. Then she asked all janitors and cafeteria ladies that. She raised her school from an F school to a B school in 2.5 years, right? She had that 1 minute meeting, that concept. And so I think that we can always say what we can't do. We can always think about a deficit model, but there's always a way. There is always a way. Like, that's one thing that I believe about, like, our culture, like, we gonna find a way. And so if you really want it bad enough, if your school wants it bad enough, you can find a way, right? 1 minute meeting is one strategy. That strategy might not work for you, but there might be another one that does.
I'm about to order that book right now.
Name again? Can I get that author's name again?
That's my homegirl, so I'm gonna always try to put money in people's pockets. Dr. Mary Hemphill. HEMPHILL.
So let me ask you this: Is it a book? Is it on Amazon? Does she have her own personal website? Because if she got her own personal website, I go through that because that's all her money. So
yeah, no, she absolutely. You can go through Amazon. Actually, this is how I roll. A couple of weeks ago, I did a 2-hour workshop for all administrators, cabinet, vice principals, principals, and at the end of it, I did like, what is microaggression? What's implicit bias? How do you use that? I did an activity around how to see it. So like I had them name the implicit bias, name the microaggression for scenarios that I provided. And then after that, they were like, this is great. What do we do? I was like, glad you asked, and brought Mary in to have a conversation with her for about 30 minutes. And the teachers were like, it was going up on the chat. It was like, and so the superintendent happened to be on this call and she said, we're going to buy it for everybody. So she bought.
So, y'all know how we do. So,
we on the same page. Go ahead.
Real quick, let's do this quick commercial break.
There you go. Thank you.
Any school leader out there, hit me on Twitter, @DrVMSATH, Dr. V Smith. I'm buying the first 5 to hit me that want the book. I'm buying you a copy. Hit me up.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes. And then Dr. Beasley, if you could, for me and for the crew, ask the great doctor, we would love to do a show called the 60-minute podcast if she wants to, and we can have this conversation as well with her. So please extend her this invitation to join the AOS. We would love to have that. We're all school leaders. I wrote that. I'm about to order that when we get off this show, but we would love to have her on. So share that with her. I don't know if she's listening, but you're welcome. And I'm with Doc. I'm going to go ahead and buy my copy as well. And I'm going to buy some copies for some of my crew, too. I see my good friend, Alan Mickens, who's a school leader here in Indy, brother. I got you. I'm going to get you one, too, brother. So definitely appreciate that.
All right, we'll bring it full circle. I got mine, too. I'm order mine, and I'll have 5 copies for my folks.
I love it. Yes, I can't wait to text her after this show.
Absolutely.
So, she's on East Coast time, and she's as busy as I am. But I'm going to text her and let her know. No, it's beautiful, and I like to bring my whole crew with me. So I also have been doing like this equity webinar series, and I brought my girlfriend Sophia Noble, who's the author of Algorithms of Oppression. And she talks about the ways in which the internet has oppressive search engines that kind of marginalize communities even further based on what people see. And she's done some really amazing work with, you may know them, Harry and Meghan Markle. She just, you may know them. Yeah. And she's done some amazing work with them. And I brought her into the space because I thought it was important for teachers, especially white teachers, white ally teachers, and maybe those who are not allies, to hear a woman who was from a small town just like them. And she talked about being from Fresno, being pipelined into Fresno State, and being told that she can never be successful. And my favorite part of her talk was she talks about getting her master's from San Jose State, and how she just didn't get it by like one piece of paper that she, didn't turn in. And then fast 14 years later, she's a #1, bestseller or whatever. She gets an offer from Oxford. She sends the offer letter from Oxford to San Jose State and was like, can I get my paper now? Can I get my master's now? No, I still can't. She's like, and here's the thing, it doesn't really matter, right? Because like I'm doing big things, but it does matter because here's another space in education where I wasn't seen. And I'm a Black woman with a doctorate degree who runs a full center, is a full professor at a Research One institution. And I still have to like fight for my right to be seen and get the things that are owed to me. And so bringing folks like that into the space, and my work is with suburban communities, bringing folks like that into the space, it's hard to defute that there's a problem and that there can't be solved, that it's a problem that can't be solved by like people who really care.
Man, this has been, sometimes you get something you don't even know you need. This was one of those, right? I got something I didn't even know I needed today on this Wednesday in this, Doc and I, where we at this bitter cold ice weather, but this was definitely the heat that we needed. But we're almost at our minute, and we always close out with final thoughts. And so as the guest, we will let you go last to kind of close us out. And so I'll kick it off again. My closing thoughts is thank you. Thank you to you, Dr. Beasley, for sharing everything that you share, especially that story. It's given me that extra motivation that is never, I don't necessarily say that I need, but I always take, because in this work is hard and it's a grind day in and day out. So you always need a little extra push. So thank you for that. And thank you for the connection on the book. Just went on Amazon to get 3 copies. So Unc, I got you. Alan, I got you. And I got mine, and I'm going to order 2 more after that. So just went ahead and dropped that. And so definitely going to support that as well. But thank you again for coming out.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'll jump in there. That way, boy, you can go right before the guest. Since you got us this amazing connect. So I got mine too. There's my Amazon confirmation right there. So I got mine, Dr. Harris. I got you one coming your way as well. And then I got 2 other copies. So like I said, the first 2 people to hit me on Twitter, I'm sending those 2 copies to you. So just a couple things I want to talk about. And David kind of took my thunder a little bit when he talked about the traits or the strategies, because the 2 that stuck out to me was affirm your students and also ask students what they need. But the thing that I'm going to encourage teachers to make sure that they really love themselves first. To make sure that you can affirm yourself before you can affirm somebody else. And just to give you a little bit pitch, that we did a activity in my school for Final Friday where we had teachers write a note of appreciation to another teacher. And it was kind of like a credit card that you use to get something from the mobile vending machine that we did. And, we just did it kind of anonymously and things like that. But then I kind of found out on that Monday afterwards, after I delivered all the notes of appreciation, that there were some teachers who didn't write notes. Like teachers got blank cards. They didn't, the person that was supposed to write them a note didn't do it. So that just really, if you can't do that for a fellow teacher, it makes me hard pressed to believe you can do it for a student. So really teachers, that 21-day challenge that they talked about, I think is very powerful as well. So, but definitely, one of the things I'm going to push going forward is affirming students and asking students what they need, especially as we look at the 1 year, we roll into the 2nd year of remote learning. And the last thing is just be on the lookout, because the AOS got some heat. We got some heat in the chamber. So be on the lookout for what we got coming to y'all.
And I'll finish up the fellow. I just want to say thank you all for joining us today. It's been a great experience. I'm so proud. I just sat back and took a lot of what Dr. Beasley had to say. I know she brings the fire all the time. So thank you, Dr. Beasley. And I think, again, we're all going through some really challenging times, and that affirmation is something that we all need. And a little thing, I got, someone made a comment to me the other day and said, Mr. Ball, you're doing a great job. And that's what I needed at that time, at that moment. And it's just so powerful. The little things that we can do to acknowledge other folks is powerful. And so just continue to do that, continue to show love, continue to, love yourself, do what you need to do to sustain, and not just sustain, but to take yourself to the next level, so you can do the same thing for your students and for your staff. Dr. Beasley, you're up.
Yeah. I think, first of all, thank you all. This was so much fun. Invite me back. I love to do it again. So thank you, Mr. Ball, for inviting me to the space. And I think what I would just end with is, it's not enough for us to survive this life. We have to be able to thrive in it. And what thriving looks like is being able to take care of ourselves and be able to take care of each other, and to take care of our most valuable possessions, which are our youth and our children. And if we can do that, not by these big leaps and bounds, but just like one small step a day, we're going to get somewhere that's really beautiful. And I want to thank you all for letting me hang out with y'all today.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, as always, welcome to the Realist Ed Movement, but this was the Realist Affinity Space. And Dr. Beasley, we appreciate you again for coming on with us. We had a comment. It said that, what was the name of that again? It's called the 1 minute meeting. The 1 minute meeting. But if you follow us,
Dr. Mary Hempfield. Yeah,
if you follow us on Twitter and add us, we will get you a copy. So just go ahead and add us on Twitter, the AOS Podcast. We'll get you a copy. But this has been AOS Podcast, episode 16. Thank you for joining us, folks. Hope you share this, like this video. You're going to see the audio of it. You're definitely going to see some clippings of this, especially that story. So be on the lookout. And again, catch us in 2 weeks for some more free PD and the Realist Ed Movement. And we out.